Thanks for joining. We are going to whip up some little cool pork spring rolls. Pretty simple. It literally is just a few ingredients, but it's about managing some of the oils as well. You could do this in the air fryer, you could do it in the oven. Maggie prefers them this way, so we're going to do them in some cooking oil. We've got some oil going there. I know it's going to take a while just to kind of prep that, but I just want to check. This is one of those things that you need about 180 degrees, right? So with the oil, and a bit like some of the other recipes we've done, the more you put in there, it cools it down. So we really want to kind of manage that. So that's really hot at the moment, which is great. We can turn that down a little bit. Got a little bit of oil going in there. I just want to quickly cut up some of this onion very finely. Again, what you can see there, so I've got a pork mince there, around 400 grams of pork mince. You don't need, too much of that. And also what I've got is, you can see the vegetables there. That's a coleslaw mix. We're just going to cook that through. I have chopped that up more, albeit we're already fine. I've taken out big chunks, but chopped it up a little bit more because you don't want it too chunky, right? So let's just cut some of those onion up again, fairly fine. We probably don't need to use all that onion, right? And I just want to pre-cook this in the pan, and then we'll cook these in these little spring roll frozen spring roll papers that you can see there, and they're really fine, so you've got to be careful pulling them apart. I've also got we'll do a little teaspoon maybe of ginger, just a little teaspoon of ginger. She's not here at the moment, but a teaspoon of ginger, and again just kind of a chunk teaspoon of garlic. We might just mix it all together, and then we're going to pre-cook this. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of sauce I want to put in there as well. So let's just put all this in, because you really just want to cook this just for a few minutes, just to soften it up. Obviously cooking the meat or the pork. That could be a beef, could be a chicken. You could do full veggie here. So that's probably, we'll use all that. Right, so a couple of sauces. We're going to push this down a bit of sauces and also some spices in there. Right? So we'll put in a pinch of salt. Don't put too much salt in, because we are going to put a little bit of soy sauce in as well, just a pinch of chili there. Now just a splash of this fish sauce. We open that up. Don't overdo it, because you don't want too fishy, right? So I'm literally a teaspoon there. I'll do also just a little teaspoon of sesame oil. You could do normal oil if you don't have sesame oil. Just gives it that kind of extra flavour. Oh, something set Maggie off. And also, you don't want this to be too dry, but also the trick is, I know it sounds strange, but you don't want it too wet either, because you want this crispiness of the spring rolls once they come out. And again, just kind of a little bit of soy. It's kind of 2 teaspoons of the soy there. I've got a tiny little bit of this thick teriyaki sauce, which you don't have to use, but it's just kind of another additional flavour. 1.5, 2 of those. And just a quick mix together. I've got that warming up already, remember that? And we can keep mixing this up once it's obviously in the pan, so don't be too worried if that doesn't kind of mix right up. So I might get you to come around here, if I can please, and I'm literally just gonna cook this off. Sweat off those vegetables. You want to try and get the veggies relatively soft. Just watch that hot oil there. Get a bit more light onto that, and just breaking it up. Okay, so just quickly cooking it through, breaking it up. You don't necessarily have to pre-cook this, but I prefer to. You could actually do it raw and then put it into the spring roll wrappers and then cook it straight that way. But at least this way you know it's been cooked. And we'll let that sit for a little bit to cool down, so it's not going to be too hot when you're rolling it in the wrappers as well. Now this spits, you're going to see a lot of spitting too, so it's always good to have something to cover up, maybe an apron or something. I don't know what it might be, but just covering up so that doesn't spit over you. So let's just manage the heat on that. That's good. I've got that going. We might just let that cook through, and we'll come back and we'll show you how we're going to roll those up. Additional thing that you can put in here, if you've got some of these, I've bought a massive bulk bag of this. It's that crispy onion, right? And it's got this beautifully sweet flavour. So let's just put in a little bit of that. And what it does, it's obviously going to keep the crunchiness of the pork as well. So you don't have to add it, but I think it's a kind of cool little addition to this. So you'll see a little bit of the liquid in there, but not a lot. So that's okay. That's okay. We should manage that with just rolling them fairly tight and holding that when we get those in. So that's almost done, right? You're close to. So let's let that keep going a little bit. We'll cool it off and I'll get that others prepped and we'll come back. Right, so that's cooked, that's done. There's that pork, there's those vegetables in there. We've got a few of those herbs and spices, a little bit of that sesame oil. We've got that oil, that's either a canola oil or a peanut oil or a vegetable oil. And like I said before, you want it to kind of be sitting at that 180-degree mark, okay? So I've got that little thermometer there that's going to help with that process. And it really will help with the crispiness of the spring roll. So that's climbing, which is fine. I'll let that keep going. So this is a trick. So with these spring roll wrappers that come out of the freezer, some of the packs I've bought in the past are really difficult to peel apart. And you'll see a kind of difference here. I've already pre-peeled those apart. But this one's kind of a little bit tricky. You can see it's literally like a difficult process. So I'll leave that. We'll see how we go with all these ones. I've got a little wet cloth there as well, just to kind of keep them fairly moist. Otherwise they do dry out pretty quickly. And if they dry out, they're gonna crack when you're rolling them up. So with your mixture here, making sure it's just not too hot, right? And I've got a little baster here just to kind of, just with plain water, you could use egg, but just with plain water, and I'll show you just a little envelope process. So get you to see that there. Now, just putting it on kind of that angle scenario, and don't overload them, right? Don't make them too big. How often have you ever been to a Chinese restaurant or ordered Chinese takeaway and there's massive big old Chico rolls? You don't want that. So you just want to kind of make them fairly small, fairly tight. And it's as simple as this, just rolling them. This is the spring roll part, right? Just rolling them and folding them, not making them too big. Now, if they were dry, if this was too dry, you'd just see it to crack and it would be pretty hard to do. So keeping it fairly tight, rolling it up like a little, that's a kind of envelope scenario I said before with the water. And just with that, just really, that helps that last bit just stick on so they don't fall apart. Okay, pretty simple. Again, so just with that little wet cloth over the top there, just to keep them fairly moist. But not too moist, of course, because you don't want too wet. Keeping it on the angle makes it easy for yourself. Another little scoop, try and keep them all roughly the same size. And then it's the spring roll part again. So folding it, you see that if you roll that there, again, just bringing that over, nice. And just keeping it relatively tight. Fold it through, a little bit of a water on the edge, and there they are. Okay, so we're going to keep rolling those up, waiting for the oil to heat up, and then I'll show you those quickly in the oil cooked up. And I'm going to have these just with a little side of coconut rice as well. Okay, so I'll show you that when that's plated up. So we're just going to keep those rolling. Okay, you see I've had a go at some of those. Like I said, you want to make sure that the little spring roll wrappers don't dry out. So I have got there, and they're feeling okay at the moment. Just those last couple to go through and finish up on. You can see a little pile going there. I just want to show you this because this is where it can get quite tricky. Particularly with this pastry, I've had scenarios where this pastry is really difficult to pull apart and it's hard to see how many little bits you've got there. So you've just got to be really gentle with it, otherwise it will rip. And if it rips, what tends to happen is all your filling is going to come out. Okay, so just really carefully just peeling those off. I think there's 3 or so in there. But see how that's just kind of gets a bit stuck. I also find if it's literally just out of the freezer, that's probably even harder because they're a little bit crisp and that's when it splits. So just carefully, it literally is a slow process, but just making sure they don't rip there, not stretching this really fine rice paper pastry, because then it will rip. Okay, so once you get there, it's pretty close. Slowly slowly kind of doing it. And same process as before. That one's stuck a little bit together. Putting it on an angle just makes it easy to roll. Get that kind of envelope look. Another tablespoon or so of the filling. Quick kind of roll and wrap there. Again and over. Keeping it relatively tight, rolling it up. Perfect. Wonderful. Now, if you didn't want to use all of that filling, you didn't have enough pastry or the little wrappers, what you could do, you could obviously freeze that wrapper, or that filling. And of course, you could also freeze those. Like if you don't want to cook them all in one batch, you could absolutely freeze them and put them aside for next time. The problem is, once these have been cooked and after the meal itself, they're not great when they go in the fridge. They get soggy. You don't have that crispiness. So it's one of those things you kind of got to, if you're going to cook them, eat them, within that time frame. So the last little bit there, that's a bit tricky. That one, that's getting a bit stuck. Again, just a bit of patience with it. All right, I'll keep doing this and then we'll get them ready in a second. So I mentioned they're rolled, they're done, they're ready to go. This is hot, right? So this is going to be really careful. Don't overload it because it's going to drop the heat of your oil and then you're not going to get that crispiness. It's going to take longer to cook through. So let's go with 4. Right, and that's sitting around 180, 200 degrees, so it really is hot. This is about a couple of minutes, if that. You can really see there. Look at that, that's already changing colour, that's browning up because it's really hot, that oil. A canola oil or a vegetable oil or a peanut oil. Just something fairly light, you don't want any of that heavy stuff. You don't want to do an olive oil, it's just too heavy. Just rolling that around, a bit on both sides. It doesn't have to spend much time in there, remember, because the filling's actually cooked. As I said before, if you wanted to do that without cooking it, you might need to leave it in a bit longer. And they're done. I wouldn't go much longer than that. And just putting them on a dry rack, just to get a little bit of that oil out. That one that side. And they look like the old Chico rolls. They look great. Okay, so that's pretty quick. Pretty quick. Yes, Mags. I do it with tongs because it will spit and you don't want it to spit up on you. So let's just do that forward again. Really simple, giving them space. Out of interest, let's just look and see what that temperature is now. Yeah, it's still pretty high, which is great. So you can see there, that's around 195. It doesn't need to be that hot, so you can bring it down a little bit. Just letting it cook through that there, brown up. We'll leave that. We'll keep cooking those and we'll show you that at the end.